for the general election for the prime minister, we saw similar themes that, it was a very, very highly significant election in terms of saving our democracy and saving our constitution. Another thing is the fear of the unknown. It's just that in India, it is the fear of the known. I mean, the whole hate campaign against India's Muslims.
सबसे पहले लड़ाई कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की है, संविधान की है। हम इसकी रक्षा करते हैं, अंबेडकर जी की संविधान की रक्षा करते हैं, वो इसे खत्म करते हैं।
What is the greatest national security threat to the United States? It's Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is somebody who rose to political prominence in America by questioning whether Barack Obama was really an American. The difference, of course, between him and Modi is that Modi has been in power, and the question was, will there be a check on his power?
I tell you this, we want our hostages back, and they better be back before I assume office, or you will be paying a very big price.
Hello and welcome to The Wire. I'm Arfa Khanum Sherwani. लोकतंत्र खतरे में है, संविधान खतरे में है. Democracy is in danger. Constitution is in danger. Remember the last time you heard these phrases and slogans? It was in the last general elections in India. Now in the United States, the ongoing elections, I can hear a similar theme, a similar central theme, where the Democratic Party candidate Kamala Harris is saying that if you choose Donald Trump, democracy is going to be over in the United States. To discuss this and more, I have investigative journalist and author Aaron Glantz with me, who is a highly accomplished journalist, and he is a Pulitzer finalist. He's won Peabody Award twice. He's author of 4 books, and he's right now a fellow at Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences at the Stanford University. He's also been a John S. Knight Journalism Fellow, the same fellowship that I'm a part of this year in 2024-25. He did this fellowship a few years ago. Aaron is also a former war correspondent. He's reported, besides other places, from Iraq. Welcome to The Wire, Aaron. First of all, my question to you would be that I was looking at a few polls, and it says that a few United States presidential elections have been as tightly contested as this one. Now, the question that comes to our minds is that when the election is taking place on the 5th of November, when exactly are we going to know who will be the president, who is the president of the United States?
Probably not the next morning. Probably it'll take a few days. The longer it takes, probably the more contested it will become in terms of President Trump and his supporters, potentially destabilizing the counting. But so many of our votes are done by mail now. And in some states like California, where we are, and that's expected to go to Vice President Harris, but they may be counting for weeks here in California. So I think that everyone is really excited to know as quickly as possible. But I do think that it's likely that, people will wake up the next morning in India, or maybe the next day after that, and we may still not know who won.
So just a couple of months ago, I was in India and covered the whole general elections there. And now I'm in the United States. I was thinking of some quiet time here during the fellowship. But, I think journalists, wherever they go, elections and politics follow them. So now I was also trying to understand this very complicated electoral system of the United States. So Joe Biden in 2020, like the elections were on Tuesday, and until Saturday, we did not know who actually had won until Saturday. So this election is also going to be on Tuesday, and that's also a fixed thing that it's supposed to be in November on a Tuesday.
We always have our elections. It's in the Constitution on the first Tuesday in November. But that doesn't mean that we finish counting the votes immediately. Right. And so I think that it has definitely been the custom here in the United States. Often we'd wake up the next morning and know what the answer was. That definitely happened in 2016 with President Trump, and in 2012 with President Obama, and 2008 with President Obama. But remember, people can go back to 2000 when there was a very, very close contested election between George W. Bush and Al Gore, that we did not know the answer to that until some weeks later, that Al Gore prevailed nationally in the popular vote by a pretty significant margin, but that the result in the state of Florida back in 2000 was extremely tight, measured in just hundreds of votes. And the way our presidential election system works in the US is we have the electoral college. So it doesn't matter who has the most votes in America. What matters is who gets first to 270 electoral votes, which with each state giving a certain number towards that in apportionment to the number of members of Congress and senators they have. It's really a convoluted system. It can give people a headache, even here in the United States. But what that means is that you could have a situation where either Trump or Harris is way up in the popular vote, and we could all know that more people voted for them in America than the other candidate. But we could have a very close election in, say, Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Arizona, where that could go on for a few days just simply because it's so close. And then all eyes around the world will be on those highly contested states. Because that is where the outcome of the election will be determined.
Aaron, there are many people who don't know that you are also a long-time India watcher. You told me during our past meeting that you were also there in the year 2002. You were in Gujarat just after the riots had broken out. Now, the past election, the Lok Sabha, the general election for the Prime Minister, we saw similar themes that, it was a very, very highly significant election in terms of saving our democracy and saving our constitution. Another thing is the fear of the unknown. It's just that in India, it is the fear of the known. I mean, the whole hate campaign against India's Muslims, and also, portraying the principal opposition party, Congress party, as the enemy of the nation. Here also, it's kind of a deeply divided polity and society, where both the candidates are calling each other names, from fascist to unhinged to even, I mean, Donald Trump went on to saying that even being a Marxist and socialist is also some kind of a very bad thing. Are you able to draw any comparisons between how India voted and how you see it in the United States? We both know we both are diverse societies, and on one hand you have the oldest democracy of the world, and on another you have the largest democracy of the world.
Well, I think when we were talking about Modi and the fact that his whole political origin story has to do with the communal violence in Gujarat in 2002, and the pitting of Hindus and Muslims against each other in India, and then watching him ascend to prime minister and then consolidate his hold over the country. This most recent election in India became a real referendum on that, and a referendum on how much power he should have. And we've watched, those of us around the world, the center of political gravity in India shift over the last 20 years from Modi really being on the extreme when I was in Gujarat in 2002 after those riots, to him being the most powerful person in the country for a number of years now, right? And so actually the comparison to Trump is quite on the nose in this respect. I mean, remember, Donald Trump is somebody who rose to political prominence in America by questioning whether Barack Obama was really an American. He said that the president of the United States had falsified his birth certificate. He did so without evidence, and he was seen as very extreme and outside of the mainstream. And then in 2016, he actually rode that anger and hate into the presidency and became the president. So now the difference, of course, between him and Modi is that Modi has been in power. And the question was, will there be a check on his power? In Trump's case, we had 4 years of we rejected him in a very hotly contested 2020 election. And now he's back. And now we will either go back to that Trump period, or we will go with Kamala Harris, who, she is portraying herself as the new generation of leadership, trying to turn the page. But she's also, of course, the vice president of the current sitting president. So she's both a change agent from the Trump era and also, the incumbent. So that's that's some of the dynamics at play, and it's been very interesting to watch their closing messages. Right, uh, Kamala Harris spoke on the ellipse in front of the White House, and she spoke, as you said, about the future of democracy. Um, there's a lot of people in this country who may be supporting Donald Trump because they see the economy as in tough shape. They see him as a good, strong leader for jobs and lowering the cost of living here. But if you watched his rally in Madison Square Garden over the weekend, you saw that he was really closing on a message of white supremacy, of anti-immigration, of calling people who live in Puerto Rico, saying that Puerto Rico was a garbage can or garbage dump. I mean, Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, so Puerto Ricans are not immigrants in the United States. They're actually Americans. But then, so what that says to everyone, who's concerned about his racism and hate and anti-immigration, is that even if you are a U.S. citizen, as Puerto Ricans are, if your skin color is wrong, if you don't look like the typical Trump supporter, that the hate could be targeted against you as well.
Yeah. So if you look at the election in 2016, it's somehow understandable from a point of view of people who wanted to give a chance to this guy who was challenging, the social elite, the political elite. Although he himself is one of those, he's a very wealthy man. But then at the same time, now what he did when he was during his tenure of 4 years, which was the hatred, the divisions, Muslim ban. And he literally promoted hatred for people who did not look like them. So white supremacy, I think, was a dominant theme during his tenure. So which means from 2016 to now 2024, if this guy is able to even reach to this level where he's a strong contender, and a strong player in this election, what does it say really about America? Being a society, a country which used to pride itself on democracy, democratic values, constitution. What is really there, which is making people to vote for a man like this again?
Well, I mean, you're here, right in California right now, so you know how this question is really tearing people up and really causing a lot of folks who are critical of President Trump to really wonder, what kind of country do we live in? And even the 2020 election, which he lost, um, there were still tens of millions of people who voted for him. I mean, he got almost as many votes as President Biden. And that was after we experienced the Muslim ban, right? And we experienced family separation of immigrants, like children separated from their parents and children quite literally thrown in cages. And then we experienced the COVID-19 pandemic, where uh, he made some radically unhinged commentary, and this really erratic leadership that he displayed was definitely a factor in a million Americans dying from this disease. Uh, so um, so even after that, tens of millions of people voted for him, and at this point, a lot, people have like a recency bias. People are struggling right now, and there were some good things going on in his presidency, like unemployment was low. Unemployment is still low, but costs were lower back then. People definitely have a sense that um, they had a little bit easier life in terms of these bread and butter issues when he was president. And also, there's definitely seems to be a market in the United States for hatred. There's a lot of people who are attracted to this kind of demagoguery here. And that kind of populist message it has really, really worked for him. There's a lot of people who, who feel that way.
Well, I was talking to a taxi driver, an Uber driver who was a Hispanic, and I think some of what you're saying was also reflected in the way he was trying to make his case for voting for Donald Trump, not just him or his family. And I was really shocked because I thought even if America was divided on the base of race, he should be the last person to vote for somebody like Donald Trump. But you're saying that life was easier because he happened to be president at a certain time, which was a pre-COVID time when things financially was not so stressful. Do you think there are people who may be voting for Donald Trump because they think, between 16 and 20, things were better for them financially? Because we can really see even in the state of California, which of course anyway is more expensive than most of the places in the United States, that the cost of living is really weighing heavy on people's lives, and on their quality of life.
Yeah, I know this is something that's been really frustrating to President Biden, right? Because there's a lot of things that are good about the U.S. economy right now. I mean, quite honestly, the unemployment rate is really low. So if you want a job, you can find a job, right? The home ownership rate is really high, so people are able to buy homes. The stock market is doing well. So if you're lucky enough to own stock in companies, you are able to save for your retirement or make investments. Uh, there's the America is on the leading edge of AI. Like I could go on with all the things that are going well. And I know President Biden's so frustrated, right? Because he wants to take credit for this. But at the same time, all those good things are happening. Costs have really gone up, right? Things have gotten quite expensive. And wages have not matched. And so people are struggling. And here comes Donald Trump with his bravado, right? And people feel some trust in that, right? And and it's a little bit hard for me to get behind because he doesn't do a great job of explaining how his policies will deliver for people in that way,
Right.
right?
So
Um,
I'm going to
yeah.
come, since we're running short on time, I'm going to come to Kamala Harris and Democratic Party's strategy in a bit. But I really want to discuss the issue of Palestine. There are not many people who are, first of all, ready to talk about it. There is only a small liberal section which even feels that it's a debate. But then there is a section of US population which feels completely let down, which feels frustrated, which feels it's not their country anymore. I'm talking about Arab, Americans, Muslim Americans, and there are many other liberal Americans who may not have directly anything to do with, let's say, Muslims or Palestine, but they feel empathy, they feel compassion, and they just feel it's unfair what's happening to the people of Palestine. So I was thinking from a point of view of Arab Americans or for Muslim Americans, or for that matter, the liberal Americans. We've seen the way American campuses, university campuses have erupted in protest movements. I was looking at Michigan, where people are actually running a campaign called Abandon Harris Movement. They are running campaigns and they are saying that they are not going to vote for either Democrats or Republicans. They will vote for a third party.
Yeah, well, in the United States, voting for a third party is you're not going to elect anyone. There's no proportional representation. There's no minor party candidates in our parliament, right? It's not like India where you can have like a certain number of elected officials from a relatively small party, right? So those people are just saying like, no, ethically, even though we know we're throwing away our vote, we just cannot, right, support either of these two candidates. That could really hurt Kamala Harris in the election. Michigan has the highest proportion of Arab and Muslim voters. It's also a swing state. So if Kamala Harris cannot carry Michigan, um, her path to becoming the president gets a lot tougher. And it's quite possible that people who have exactly the opinion that you just have expressed could cost her the state of Michigan. You mentioned Arab American and Muslim voters, also younger voters, like people of the younger generation are watching what's being done. I mean, it's the Israeli military, but it's with weapons that were provided mostly by the United States, right? And so younger people, you mentioned the protest across college campuses, but I've talked to a number of younger people. I think these particular folks will probably still vote for Kamala, but but there really has shaken their belief in American democracy in a very significant way. And there is going to be a real reckoning on this issue politically in one way or another. The problem that the Democrats have on this is that there is a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States on the other side, and like going all the way back to 9/11 and the way in which Arabs and Muslims were universally painted as terrorists in the aftermath of 9/11. And that is a very strong strain in American politics. And Donald Trump is whipping up that anti-Arab and anti-Muslim sentiment, right? And so you have a lot of people, and you have the potential next president of the United States out there saying that Muslims are the enemy and Arabs are the enemy, right? And so then you have Kamala on the other side trying to kind of triangulate. And so if you are a voter who really cares about the Palestinian people, or you really care about people in Gaza, you really have nowhere to go in this election. And that puts voters who have that opinion in a very difficult, painful place.
But Aaron, I was looking at this tweet just 10 hours ago. Donald Trump has tweeted about how he's going to bring peace to Middle East. And I saw some Muslim groups in Michigan, extending their support for Donald Trump and forgetting that he's the man who actually introduced the Muslim ban. And you just said he's trying to incite people against the people of color, and especially religious minorities like Muslims. It is really complex to understand why would he now make this claim that he's the one who's going to bring an end to the war. In fact, this gentleman who I met in the Uber driver, one of the things that he said why he was going to vote for Donald Trump was that he said he's sick of all the war and violence and bloodshed, and Donald Trump is the guy who's going to bring an end to the war.
Well, Donald Trump may have said that on Twitter, but he also said like 2-3 days ago to Bibi Netanyahu, "Do whatever you want," right? So Donald Trump says a lot of things. He says a lot of things. If you listen to him over a period of time, you can find that he said most things about most things, right? And so it really comes to be your judgment of him. But he loves to say this. He loves to have this bravado, like, "I'll bring the people together and we'll have a deal in 24 hours. He said that he'll settle the war in Ukraine on the first day also, right? Just get me and Vladimir Putin and Zelensky together and we'll settle it, right? And so it's very clear that Trump and Netanyahu and this far right Israel lobby are very, very close. That's just factually accurate. Now, it is also true that during the Trump presidency, there was not war like there is now. It is a fact that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine under President Biden. It is a fact that Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th under President Biden, and then Israel has counterattacked for a year under President Biden. So it's a fact that there has been a more unstable world, actually, under President Biden. The question becomes, what will President Trump do about this, a potential President Trump? And we have a pretty clear record of where he stands.
Right. So I was also looking at it from young people's point of view. Many of them would be first time voters. And, there are people on campuses, besides being the section of population which is Arab American, Muslim American, many of them are South Asians. I know a lot of them personally who are really hurt at the way at the way Biden administration has mishandled this entire issue. Kamala Harris, in one of the election campaigns, when people asked him, what is she going to do about this? Then she said she is going to make sure all the Israeli hostages are brought home. And she did not utter the word Palestine. And there were many people from the Arab community who were trying to raise a question about Palestine, and they were not allowed to even make a presence in one of her rallies. Where do you think all this hurt, this dissatisfaction, this disenchantment with your own country and government is going to take America? And do you think it's going to even deepen the social divide even all the more?
Well, we've always had a great tradition in the United States of most people being dissatisfied with the candidates, right? Like, we have two candidates, we have a two-party system, so you can't go outside of those two parties like you can in India or some other places. And we have a great tradition of people holding their nose and picking the person they hate least, right? Like, that's a great American tradition. Specifically, the difference I think with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is that for those Muslim and Arab Americans who have family over there, where um, they have seen Gaza be destroyed and maybe lost their own family members in this destruction, or they are worried about their loved ones who live in Lebanon, or they're worried that the war could expand and US and Iran could be at war and their family members in Iran, their lives could be at risk. It just makes it very personal for people, right? And so I think that the concern for that people are wondering is how many people, knowing everything that that you said about Donald Trump supporting the Muslim ban, speaking hate against Arab and Muslim people, it may be too much to ask people to go into the voting booth and, fill in the bubble for Kamala Harris when the Biden administration has not stopped this killing, has provided the bombs, and Vice President Harris has put a little bit of distance between herself and Biden. I mean, to say bring the hostages home implies that when that happens, the war will end, right? Hamas has not released these hostages, right? So in a way, she's saying like hostages come home, war ends. That's different than what Netanyahu is saying, which is like complete and utter destruction of Hamas and victory. And it's also different than what Trump is saying. So
And
she is creating some difference, but how important is that difference to those people who have lost loved ones is unclear.
And also, Erin, as the Vice President of the United States, as somebody who's now the face of this campaign, who was projecting herself as the next president, she should know the power of language and vocabulary. Why did she stop at just saying the hostages will be brought home and not said that this is going to end the war? This is not where it ended when she said that. Finally, now I know we're running short on time. Do you think this whole thing is going to bring us to a point where we may not experience peaceful transfer of power? Are you apprehending some kind of a violence, some unrest, instability?
Well, I mean, there's three options over the next week, right? Like the one is that she wins very convincingly. Another is that he wins very convincingly. And the third option is a contested election, right? And I think that a contested election is quite possible, right? Everything that we've seen so far is that it's looking very close. So, as we discussed at the beginning, it could be a few days before we know who got more votes. During those delays, we have one of the two candidates, former President Trump, who is trying to sow distrust in the entire election system. So we can predict that will happen. And then where it will go from there, I don't know. But it's definitely going to be a potentially dangerous and unstable time. Some of the newsrooms that I've been advising on their election coverage, I've said, you keep your journalists on hand through March of next year. Even though January 6th was when they're supposed to certify the vote. That's when Donald Trump set the mob at the Capitol last time. January 20th is when the new president is supposed to be sworn in. So we could be in dispute all the way to then, and we could be in dispute even after that. It's possible.
Thank you very much. There isn't much time left now for us to see. And for me personally, it's going to be the first election of the United States that I will be watching from close quarters. Thank you very much for your time, Aaron.
द वायर के और वीडियोस देखने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल आइकन पर क्लिक करें। स्वतंत्र पत्रकारिता की आर्थिक मदद करने के लिए डिस्क्रिप्शन में दिए गए लिंक पर जाएं और अपनी राशि चुनें।